Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome to today's program Valentina Jordan, who's CEO and founder of Nauta. And today we're going to talk about AI and supply chain. Why does data and context matter? So, artificial intelligence, not surprising, is dominating conversations in supply chain today. Every software vendor seems to have an AI story, and every executive is being asked about their AI strategy. But amid all the excitement, many organizations are discovering that implementing AI is much harder than simply plugging in a large language model to their ERP or supply chain application. Data is, fragmented, business processes are complex, and without the right operational context, even the most advanced AI models can produce recommendations that are incomplete, impractical, or just, simply wrong. So, what does it really take to unlock AI's potential in supply chain operations? Well, that's the main question we're going to explore in today's episode, and I'm excited to have Valentina on the program to share her insights and advice. So, Valentina, welcome to Talking Logistics.
Thank you so much for having me, Adrian. Happy to be here.
Valentina, before we kind of dive in, I gotta say, every morning I launch LinkedIn, and you're one of the first people I see on my LinkedIn feed talking about AI in supply chain. So you really love talking about this topic, and I assume it's because you encounter it every day with your clients, with the companies you talk to.
Yeah. Definitely. Being brutally honest, I feel a huge responsibility of closing the gap with what I'm seeing here in San Francisco. There's very deep, intellectually challenging, motivation, conversation, sorry, where we're speaking about AI. But I also see that there's a huge gap between what's happening in San Francisco and then what's happening in the Midwest of the United States, which is where my clients are actually at. And so we're trying to bring AI from 30,000 feet, super abstract concept into something that it's actually digestible and it doesn't feel as daunting as the news makes it sound.
Yeah, so I gotta say I'm a fan of your little videos. They're perfect, and so I'm really we're probably gonna be a bit
Getting
longer
outside of
than
my comfort zone.
we're probably going to be a little bit longer than your short videos, but we'll address some of the things that again you probably have shared already in some of those snippets. So let's get started. I mean, like I said in my opening remarks, I mean, supply chain leaders are under pressure, obviously for their day-to-day responsibilities. Improve service, reduce costs, respond faster to disruptions. But now they're also being told that they need an AI strategy. Um, in your view, I mean, what are companies getting wrong today when they try to apply AI to supply chain operations?
Yeah, so Adrian, I think there's multiple levers or ways to approach this. And I think there's always people, process, and technology, right? And so we're jumping straight into the technology and skipping the part that there's people and a process behind it. And so, first thing that I'm going to say, and we can get deeper into this, is that we're seeing AI as something that will just plug and play into an existing process or replace copy paste just as it is. And the reality, it's not magic. It doesn't work with perfection unless you involve the people and the process right into it. So I think it needs to be seen more as a transformation than just as a technology that you're just plugging and playing into organizations. Now, I don't blame them because I think the biggest behavioral change that we're seeing is the difference between implementing SaaS and implementing agentic solutions, right? We're used to buying SaaS, and buying SaaS is buying something that will make your operators super powerful. When you're buying agentic, you're basically buying into changing, transforming, and the work, the output. So the big challenge again is I would summarize it technology, people, and processes, and we're leaving out people and processes out of the equation.
Yeah, you could argue, I mean, that's always been the case, right? But I think and companies make this mistake over and over and over again, right? They chase the silver bullet, the next shiny new thing, right? And AI happens to be the next shiny new thing. But I love the framework of it truly being a business transformation, right? Because this is really an opportunity to really take a step back and look at all those three components in a very different light, and making sure that you're not ignoring the people and the process aspect of it, because the technology, you can repeat some of the same mistakes that companies have made in the past in terms of, implementing technology for the sake of implementing technology, but all they're really doing is either automating bad processes or their people resist the new technology because they don't understand it. They think it's more complex, whatever the case might be. And if your users don't buy into it, it's going to be a failed, implementation. Um,
100%.
so I think that's great. I think I love the transformation piece. We've done a variety of different surveys over the past couple of years with our Indago supply chain research community around AI. And in one of the recent surveys that we did, we asked what is a top barrier to faster, better decision making? Because obviously this is an area where AI is being positioned as helping significantly.
Yeah.
And the number one area was they said data exists, but it's fragmented across systems, right? That's been the challenge that they have in terms of making better, faster, decisions. So I guess my first question is, does that surprise you? And secondly, why does getting the data foundation right matter so much before companies can really benefit from AI?
Yeah, so a little bit here on Nauta. Nauta is the operational brain for companies in supply chain. And when we say operational brain, we're basically talking about the single source of truth. We combine structured and unstructured data sources, combined with context, knowledge, and experience of operators into this living brain where agents can consume to make decisions. So, why is this so important? Because decision making is not just about the hard facts, right? You're not going to make decisions just on a textbook answer. If doctors would only take, what's in the textbook and not analyze what actually happened with the patient, how much misdiagnosis would we have? It would be terrible. That's exactly what we're basically asking AI to do, unless we give it context, knowledge, and experience, which is what human beings and operators gather on their day-to-day job. So having the centralized data doesn't only allow you to understand the business properly, to make all these decisions, but to bring it down from 30,000 feet general knowledge into what actually happens in the day to day. Specifically in the supply chain industry, this is a little bit more challenging because it's fragmented by nature, not only in systems, but in stakeholders. If you think about it, there's more than straight 12 stakeholders that would touch a single purchase order, right? You have customs broker, the carrier, the supplier, the importer, the 3PL. Like by nature, there's so many people involved to have a single pallet or a box or a container move to point A to point B. Now, if you add another layer, which is their internal systems, just from the shipper side, you have ERP, TMS, WMS, OMS, YMS. So fragmentation is so hard by nature. Now, put an agent to make decisions and not access information. What are they going to do? Give you the textbook answer. And that won't include context, knowledge, and experience of the company. So this is the reason why it's so, so important and why being aware of it, it's critical if you actually want to have transformation and real ROI when implementing artificial intelligence. We're still, I hate when people say that the supply chain industry is not techy. I mean, companies pay so much money for a very robust tech stack. The big challenge is that it's not interconnected, right? We barely have MCPs still. A lot of the systems have sometimes APIs, some others have EDIs, but they're not very open to connecting to each other. So here the challenge is how do you get information in and out of this systems of record to ensure that AI actually transforms? So that's why it's so, so, so important for it to be changed from textbook answering to real operational knowledge of your company.
Yeah, and that I'm going to ask a follow-up question because I think this builds on something else that I hear a lot of companies, right? I think and you might have, I can't remember if you addressed this in one of your little videos, um, but there's a debate, right, that says, well, I can't get started with AI until I get this data foundation in place first, right? And then there are others that say, well, you're never going to get that data foundation 100% right, and you're going to be losing ground. You're going to be left behind because you're not getting started with AI, right? So it's like, the cart before the
It's gonna
horse,
be
or do I get started now? So, I mean, how would you respond to that? Do you
yeah.
wait till you kind of get that data foundation? Is that like you're never going to get it 100% where it needs to be? Or do you get started with AI somewhere? I mean, how do you address that, or what do you see in that debate?
Look, that's a great question. And I think right when we started, we're like, we're going to fix all of this messy data. First of all, there's no fixing. The data is not broken. And it's not necessarily messy, it's chaotic by nature because supply chain is chaotic. There's no chronological order in things. You never receive first the purchase order, then the invoice, then the packing list. It doesn't happen that way. It just flows in any order possible. And so that being said, I think the best suggestion that we always give clients is start with something that you can measure, right? And control step by step. AI would not only be successful unless you take into consideration people, process, and technology, but also if you don't have a clear goal for it, right? If you try to cover the sun with one hand, nothing's going to move. So, what you want to do is choose a specific area, OKR, KPI that you want to move, and think about AI as output. You're not buying software, you're buying transformation and you're buying the work. So, when our clients are using your different agents and are using our company brain, they're not thinking about the agent itself, they're thinking about the work that the agent is doing, and that's the level of impact that we're measuring. So you're not going to have an employee and have it fix your whole system of record in one day, right? You're going to say, hey, let's start with the supplier paperwork. So same kind of analogy is what you would want to do here in order to take it step by step. Doing it all at once in an industry like supply chain is just too overwhelming.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, again, this is kind of the classic, right? It's not Big Bang, right? We all learned like Big Bang implementations back in the ERP days. Those never
Yeah,
worked, or high risk, high failure. And then the classic, crawl, walk, run, right? So, and
totally.
and where do you begin? Well, to your point, really have a clearly defined objective and KPI that you're looking to improve, and then there you can, focus the resources, the people, really understand the processes, how you can transform that process, and then how can you leverage some of this technology to, make progress on that business objective that you've already defined.
I would add to that, Adrian, and I think these are conversations that we have a lot, and it's like data foundation and data quality is super subjective, right? Because there's no real measurement on when it's done. What's the definition of done in terms of like your data foundation? So is this never-ending pursuit of something that you don't even know what the definition of done is? So the only thing that it's happening there is your cost of doing business, what you're leaving behind of not implementing AI, it's bigger than the possible like challenges that you might have when implementing that with feedback loops and through doing the work with your partner, you can fix really fast. So
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, the reality is this is an ongoing process, right? Because you're adding new suppliers all the time, you're adding new customers all the time, new transportation providers, new 3PLs. So, it's never a done process. It's an ongoing, business process. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about another kind of question or topic that I get asked a lot, and I see people talking a lot about as well. And that is, companies asking, hey, why can't I just connect like Chat GPT or Claude to our
yeah.
ERP or our supply chain application and, call it a day? I mean, what's your response to that? And why, what does a general purpose AI model typically miss when it comes to real world supply chain operations?
Look, I think all of the labs are great, and they've done a great job helping us educate the general population on how accessible AI is to transform your business. But because it's accessible, it doesn't mean that it's easy, cheap, and sustainable to maintain, right? What happened with AI is that the cost of building just basically lowered so much, and it's relatively easy for anyone to take something from 0 to 80 to 85% into production, have it running and transform parts of the business. But the reality is that if it's not your core business, you're going to have a team, dedicate a team to maintain it, to give it feedback, to improve it, because it's not going to be perfect from day one, right? And so if you're, let's say, a distributor of, I don't know, eggs, or if you're a manufacturer of automotive, do you really want to have a team into each of their departments with their own Claude or their own Chat GPT connections, maintaining that? I think that's a question that companies need to ask themselves. It's not like they can't build it. Should you? And I think there's a big difference there. Not because we can, we should. And I think that AI, there's a huge level of harnesses and knowledge and context, and it's a never-ending process that we dedicate whole own teams experts in supply chain, improving agents, improving their tooling, improving the way that they're accessing information. And so just basically shoot to shoemaker. We're not, I'm not distributing eggs because that's not my strength. And that's why we come in and help companies. So I do think though that there's a beautiful movement happening, and it's people building, people trying it out. And I would never try to disincentivize that, because we do want people educating themselves, being curious, because that's what's going to take operators to the next level. I don't think people will end without a job if they are curious with AI, if they're playing around with it, if they're building. Those that resist will be the ones that are going to be having a very hard time in their careers later on. So I think it is just a fine balance.
Yeah, and I love that. I mean, I think that you know, it's not a quite like you said, it's not a question of can you or can't you. It's a question of should you or should you not, right? Because what business are you in ultimately, right? If you're a manufacturer, you're in the manufacturing business. If you're a retailer, you're in the retail business. You're not necessarily in the software development or agent development, business per se. But that said, we all know that we may have a TMS, a WMS, supply chain planning solution, whatever, inventory management solution, but all of us, this is probably a silly example, but we may also be using side tools, right? Excel, of course, being the most common one, right? So even though we have this packaged solution and high powered one, we're still using Excel and maybe building some Excel macros because they're doing some specialized things. And I think what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is that hey, it's a balance of both, right? So yes, you can use Claude or ChatGPT to replace what you're doing with Excel, perhaps, like to for those folks that are saying, hey, we've got the powerful agents, the orchestration, everything else from a provider like you, but we may want to experiment a little bit with Claude or Chat to do this very specific thing because I want to tinker with it, or maybe I'm going to prove a concept that then I could come back to you, Valentina, and say, hey, look, I built this with Claude or ChatGPT. Can you add this to the Nauta
Right.
stack, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's kind of interesting that maybe that's probably where we might see where Claude ChatGPT might become the Excel's worksheets of tomorrow.
Totally. Look, and I think that there's a security aspect to it that I think we're all ignoring, and
Yeah,
in general, because it feels accessible. It doesn't mean that the information should be there. And so we're very cautious with our clients around this. And data privacy and data security has always been the top priority for Nota. So we're also very aware and tell our clients, like, be aware that what you're sending, it says that they're not training models, but how do you actually know that? So we use open source models, we host everything. Like we really try to protect and bind all of our clients' data, because we know in supply chain this is your biggest asset. And so play out there, build stuff, but you got to be responsible, because it is the internet, and you don't want to be sending sensitive information either.
yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, we could probably do a whole episode focused, specifically on security, governance, right? Because you also don't want, to your point, you don't want if you have 1,000 employees, you don't want 1,000 different, mini apps or agents out there without some kind of governance structure, in place. So that's another, key consideration, for sure. Um, we kind of touched upon this a little bit, but maybe just to expand on it a little bit more. I mean, obviously, one of the big challenges with AI and supply chain is that, the operational environments are so complex, right? So different suppliers, lead times, the workflows, SLAs, constraints, and business rules, and so on and so on. I mean, why ultimately does that operational context matter so much when applying AI and supply chain operations? And what happens when that context is missing?
That's a great question. And so the reason why it matters, you said it perfectly, is because every company operates differently. The import-export process is in the blueprint is the same. The manufacturing process, the blueprint is the same. You have machines, you have recipes, you have planning. But the reality is that every company and every operation have their own internal processes, rules, way to manage their suppliers, way to manage their terms, their negotiations, that if you don't have that context, knowledge, and experience, it's extremely hard for it actually to take on the work and run it from end to end. So the way that I always talk to our clients about this is like if you hire a new employee and you expect them on day one to know exactly all the internal process and how things work. The employee from the previous job, they might have tools and skills that they've earned because they have done the job before or because they went to university, you name it. Um, but they are not going to know what your internal goal is. They're not going to know how you like to manage things. And that's the context, the knowledge, and the experience that is acquired in the job or that the organization has developed over time. So that's why it's so, so, so important, more in supply chain than in any other industry that I've seen so far, because everything is an exception. Everything can happen. And so if you don't have clear expectation management on how you want the AI to behave, it's just going to be very, very hard. And but because of that same reason, I do think that AI is revolutionizing the supply chain industry because the deterministic workflows that we were able to build before would never be able to catch all of the number of exemptions and ifs that happen in supply chain. Once you get into agentic, that you have reasoning, that you have memory, now we can really enter and transform this process. So I actually think that the time for supply chain is now. And that's why I'm always inviting people that are holding off or waiting to to almost like jump off the cliff and understand that this is the one thing that we had never seen before and that can actually help supply chain.
Yeah, and I think that that's 100% right. I mean, I think um, I love that analogy of an employee, right? Because you can be, let's say, a transportation executive. You probably spent 10 years managing transportation at another company, but you come into a new company, you've got the knowledge, the experience, you might know how to use a TMS because you've used one before, but the network is different now than what you used to. The customer expectations or their time windows are different. How you load the trucks might be different at this new company. So, even though you have those that earned skill and knowledge, you now have to apply it in an environment that's got very unique and different, operating realities than that existed in your, previous. So when you try to, unless you have that, again, going back to what I said in my opening remarks, the AI is just going to come up with either incomplete responses or, fractured decisions or incorrect decisions. So that context is really, important to get it right.
And you know what we tend to see in companies that we're either starting to work with or have worked with is that because everything's is such a dynamic environment and things change so fast, that individual operators start to build their own processes and that never gets institutionalized as a company. So the IP of these companies, the intellectual property, is the way that they run things, the way that they take care of their clients and their suppliers. But that's on the people, on the operator side, and they never reaches management or the company itself. And so big part of what we do is capture all this, not to replace humans, but to give back and be able to optimize for processes, increase revenue, reduce costs of things that used to be on people's minds. So super common. A lot of things are not documented. There's no SOPs in a lot of times, no SOWs. And so this is also a great opportunity for companies to start to document a lot of that know-how so that it permeates over time and then they can do improvements there.
Yeah, I mean, that used to be called job security, right? For people, right? So it's like, hey, Adrian's been doing this job for 25 years. He's the only one that knows how to do this. So God help us if Adrian decides to retire or Adrian, leaves the job and goes somewhere else because nobody else
Absolutely.
knows the piece. So, in some ways, what you're really doing is capturing, you know again, to use the word context, you're capturing this know-how, because you're leveraging the data, the information. You see how things have been behaving, what kind of decisions have been made in the past. Hey, Adrian, this is the way it was executed when Adrian was the main decision maker. But now, we can kind of embed that within the application itself, within the solution itself. And not to say that I'm irreplaceable completely, but for the next person that comes along, they are given more insight and knowledge and capabilities to do their job effectively, right? Because
100%.
I
And I
I think
think
what's happened in the past is people there was always a lack of training, cross-training people and really sharing, to your point, sharing that knowledge, that know-how across the organization. And really what's happening now is that, my view is that AI agents provide that cross-training really because they provide, they're institutionalizing that that know-how, that expertise, that knowledge for anyone that might be using maybe put in that role.
100%. And look, I think human beings feel threatened. And again, back to job security, and we all do, right? When you feel that you're going to be replaced. And the reason why, in my opinion, it's because we tie our self-worth a lot of the times with how much we produce, right? So if you're the one who knows how to produce or has the access to produce certain output in your company, you feel that you're indispensable, right? But what AI changes is that it's not that you're replaceable, it's that we need you for different reasons, which is the decisions. What AI is replacing is the work itself. What it's not replacing a lot of the times is the final decision because it's not perfect yet, right? And there's still a long way to go. So I do think that if we separate our worth from how much we produce and transition it to how much value do I actually add, you're gonna tie your worth, your tied to the company to how many amazing decisions am I able to make in a single day that again generate more revenue to a company, and that's where you're actually creating wealth and value. So I think as a society, we're gonna have to change because again, everyone celebrates people who are in the office for the longest or that are working, sending emails at midnight. Things are gonna change, and we need to
Yeah.
tie it to something different.
Yeah, that's great. Well, actually, you just gave me an idea for a great potential follow-up episode or discussion, which is, how is this going to change performance reviews, right? Or how we measure and reward talent within the organizations, because that's going to change, to your point. Well,
100%.
Valentina, I mean, I think we could probably talk easily for another hour here, but maybe as a way to wrap up, maybe bringing it back a little bit to technology, even though, like we've talked about, it's not just the technology piece, it's a transformation and involves people and processes as well. I mean, when you look at supply chain technology, I mean, it's got a long history that, failed implementations, right? I've been an industry analyst for 27 years, and I've seen many horror stories, in those decades. What makes, AI implementation different? And, if you were advising a supply chain executive today, I mean, what practical steps would you recommend to improve their chances for success?
Yeah. Again, I think it's all about the numbers and you need to think about it as output, right? What are the business North Stars, KPIs, OKRs that you're trying to hit? What departments, what areas, what processes are involved, and really work backwards. The difference between agentic and your typical SaaS is that we have a SaaS, again, as a out of the box set solution that will make your people better. Here, it's not really about the people, it's about the work that you're buying. So if you don't have a clear expectation of the work will never give you ROI. So that would be the first is have a very clear objective, start small, and target it, measure, and evolve from there. That would be the first. The second, understand that people by nature are going to feel threatened. And if you do not bring up the conversation, if you don't bring out the elephant in the room, people are going to start to have conversations in their own head and almost block the success of the tool. So you need to bring the topic forward and have a clear roadmap of what do you expect of the AI transformation and what's the impact and involvement of the different stakeholders in the organization. I think that avoiding it's the worst thing that an executive can do. And then the third, not being less, is try and not put AI on processes that shouldn't be there or that don't work. This shouldn't be a band-aid, right? That needs to be transformationally focused if you really want to make the transition. So one step at a time, don't try and do it all. Don't follow, the shiny diamond just because it's there. It's in the smallest, less risky process where trust is built, and then you escalate from there. I think that having too broad of a surface area of risk makes people nervous. Start with something simple, face transformation, and then go from there.
Well, Valentina, some great words of advice. Again, we could probably talk for another hour, but I think you shared some great insights, some great advice today. So really appreciate you being on the program.
Thank you for having me. It was a great talk.
I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand, you can, and you've got a question for Valentina or myself, feel free to post it and we'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, if you want to keep track of Valentina, she produces a lot of content on AI, a lot of nuggets of information. So if you're not following her on LinkedIn, please, you go ahead and find her and make sure you follow her. Again, thank you for joining us and look forward to
Thank you
seeing you
for
in a
having me.
future episode of Talking Logistics.
Thank you
Have
for
a good
having
day.
me.